What's up, gamers? In today's video, I want to talk to you about gacha revenue. Now, I'm not going to sit here and tell you, oh, Wuthering Waves is absolutely dead to rights. It's donezo, brother. I'm not going to sit here and say that Zenless Zone Zero is the same way as well. I just want to go over what these numbers actually look like, because all in all, I don't think that Wuthering Waves is dead. I don't think Zenless Zone Zero is dead. I think that these numbers decreasing are actually a much more widespread issue, which we're going to touch on later in this video. But first, let's go ahead and now talk about the numbers in general, right? Starting off at number one, guys, the number one best gacha game in the world right now, because that's how we judge if a gacha game is good or not, is going to be Honkai Star Rail. $67 million in the month of September. That's absolutely massive. That's a 27 million increase from last month. Now, there is one thing that I want to bring up here with this whole thing, right? If we take a look at where Acheron released, right? Acheron released in March of 2024. That was 48 million globally. And then for the CN server, that was an extra 100 million there. So you can see the big decline that HSRs even took it from this, even though they're the top spot right now. Overall, they are still declining in money from when they made for Acheron, right? Now I get it. I don't think Fijao is as hype as Acheron was. Acheron was like that end-all be-all. She's like the Raiden Mei, the Raiden Shogun, whatever you want to call it, of the Honkai Star Rail universe. So obviously they're probably going to be the best sellers of the game. But overall, it is nice to see that Honkai Star Rail is at the top of the list, because I do think it is probably the best gacha game out of any other gacha game on this list here. Just like overall, right? Like, I think other games do things better than it, but I think this does show that a lot of people still have interest and play Honkai Star Rail. Now I want to touch on Genshin Impact, right? I believe Natlin just released, right? Natlin just released for Genshin Impact, and to see the number only 27 million, no one pulling on any of the banners for Natlin right now, because right now the characters you're getting are Knit, I don't know how to say his name, I'm even gonna try to say Knit, whatever his name is, and Raiden Shogun, which is a rerun. Are people really excited to pull these characters? I don't know. I feel like a lot more people are gonna want to pull this mommy right here, Xylin. I feel like she's gonna be a lot more sought after than old dude right here that's in the game right now. I think the revenue numbers will increase, and bear with me here, guys. We're gonna talk about the bigger issue at hand in a second here, because I still do have to go over both Wuthering Waves and Zenless Zone Zero as well, because Zenless Zone Zero, guys, this is actually very surprising to me. I genuinely thought that the revenue here would be I'm actually really surprised. I thought the revenue here would be much higher, considering that Jane Doe came out. September was Jane Doe's month, and to see that it only made $3 million more is actually kind of scary to me. The launch month already wasn't anything to be hype about, right? It only made $31 million in launch month, which is actually really low. CN, the same story. CN made 69 million. People are not playing this game in CN, guys. 17 million and 17 million. People were not fucking with Jane Doe. I think people just overall are maybe kind of over the whole super slutty anime character era. I don't think the characters that are releasing in Zenless Zone Zero right now are anything that Hoyo shills are really looking for, right? They're looking for their cutesy dootsy little characters, and maybe that's why we see the decrease there. Maybe that's why we don't see a huge increase for Jane Doe, because I thought for sure with the marketing they were doing and the hype that was built around Jane Doe and the you know what happened with her, I thought the revenue here would be much higher. It is nice to see it up here in $35 million range, but I consider Jane Doe an absolutely massive character. So if this is true, if Jane Doe only brings in $35 million revenue, that's down bad for this game. I guess we're at the wait to see what the average month-to-month revenue is for Zenless Zone Zero. Is it going to sit around 30 million? Personally, I think that the game will probably sit around 30 million. It probably drops below 30 million for dead patch. It probably raises a little bit above 30 million for hype patches. I feel like Zenless Zone Zero has a very dedicated audience that is only going to play Zenless Zone Zero, or maybe plays all the Hoyoverse games in general, right? The Hoyo shills definitely are playing Zenless Zone Zero 100%, and maybe that's why I think the revenue will stay around 30 million, because usually your diehard fans will keep the median around that. Of course, you lose fans, you lose money and stuff like that. We're going to talk about all the revenues combined in a second here. And then finally, this was a rough one to look at. Wuthering Waves made $10 million, $3 million less. Now, they actually have a reason for making $3 million less. They released a new 5-star character for absolutely free, so people were not going to pull on the banner regardless, just because you got a free 5-star character, and I realized that. And I think this is where we're probably going to see, the revenue sit at for Wuthering Waves, right? I think that it'll probably make around $10 million every month. I think that is going to be the baseline for the game, $10, $13 million. That is where the baseline for this actually is a 3.8 in reviews. Do people just hate Wuthering Waves? Because I feel like a lot of the Wuthering Waves people love the game that they're playing. And from when I played the game, it was a really good time playing the game. It was really fun playing the game, but it looks like people are not liking the game as much now as they once did. 3.8 there, and then obviously the decrease in revenue for the global side, it went from 13 to 8 to 5. keep in mind that's a free character, and keep in mind they're not including PC revenue, which I wish they did include, because I think that will show a different story. I don't think it'll show that much more of a story, but it will show a different story, because I feel like a lot more Wuthering Waves players are playing on computer than playing on mobile. Same thing for CN, 5 million, even with the release of this character. It's cool to see there, but it's a pretty steep drop off from 17 million to 5 million. But like I said, guys, I'm not going to sit here and shit on Wuthering Waves for dying. Wuthering Waves is done, brother, because the thumbnail might say it because clickbait and shit like that, but I do think this is a bigger and more widespread issue than just Wuthering Waves and just Zenless Zone Zero. I feel like this is competition right here at its finest, okay? Every single gacha game we see has been losing in revenue, right? If you even look at here, right, that's a 6.3 decrease on total revenue for the gacha games that they currently track right now. Of course, this is only mobile, so that's the only thing we can go off of, but still an overall decrease nonetheless. I want to take a look here at this chart that I made right here, just tracking since January the revenue for Hoyoverse, and then I also have one for Kuro as well. But this is going to be tracking the revenue for Hoyoverse overall, right? Hoyoverse in back in April, what was this number right here? Let me pull up my data right here. Back in April, it made what, $229 million. Hoyoverse as a company made $229 million. Then you can see it goes down, right? Dead patches, that's fine, right? But then we can see with the release of Zenless Zone Zero, this number goes up from what, 163 million to 178 million in July with the release of that. That's not a very big increase. And then you saw the next patch when Shingi came out, 111 million for Hoyoverse. That is a super low number for Hoyoverse standards. Let's just keep that in mind there. And then it barely brought up with the release of Jane Doe and the release of Fei Zhao as well. You're only sitting at 148 million now, which is less and or on par with what Hoyoverse was making as a whole for dead patches for both Genshin Impact and Honkai Star Rail as well, right? So overall, this Zenless Zone Zero is, I think, as we can tell right now, a failure for Hoyoverse. And you might say, well, the Zenless Zone Zero is making all this money. You have to look at it from a company perspective, right? A company revenue perspective. They released Zenless Zone Zero expecting for this number to sit or maybe more around here, right? Maybe the 200 million mark, maybe even the 180 million mark every single patch, right? As like a baseline level. This tells you that people are just moving over from both, you know, Honkai Star Rail, Genshin Impact, even Wuthering Waves, right, and playing Zenless Zone Zero. They're playing all four of these games, so there's money's being more spread out amongst those games, right? And I think you can tell that right here, right, with the decrease in revenue and not much more revenue than Hoyoverse was already making. I mean, this month they made $148 million as a company, whereas back in last May when there was 2 dead patches, they made 143. Like, there's only making, what, $4 million more than they made on a dead patch for both their games, and less than what they made when some mediocre characters came out for the game. Like, you can see right here, guys, I think this is a pretty solid point to prove here. Look at the graph here. June, 95 million for HSR, 67 million for Genshin Impact, right? Look at how these numbers dropped with the release of Zenless Zone Zero. More people swapped from these games to buy in Zenless Zone Zero, then these drop, and then they all stay the same because less people overall are playing this game, less people are spending money on the game, and they're diversifying the amount of money they're spending on these games, right? There is an obvious big drop-off in revenue here for Honkai Star Rail, Zenless Zone Zero, and Genshin Impact, and I think that can be said here too, right? This is taking a look at all of like the current trends, right? The current trends for Zenless Zone Zero, Wuthering Waves, Honkai Star Rail, Fate Grand Order, Genshin Impact, right? I just took Fate Grand Order. That's basically the old guard of gacha games, which still arguably makes a lot of money. They made $20 million this month, which is more than Wuthering Waves made, which is absolutely insane to me, but that's why I wanted to throw it up here, right? Because I think trends do show a lot. Now, you probably don't see much from this, but I did make a spreadsheet here. This is going to be the average interest of these gacha games for 6 months prior to these last 6 months, right? So whatever, subtract 12 months, right? So 12 months to 6 months, if you guys understand. Anyways, you guys should understand what I mean, right? These are all like what I would say is like the old guard, right? Is Genshin Impact, Honkai Star Rail, Fate Grand Order, right? Because we didn't have the release of Wuthering Waves yet, and we didn't have the release of Zenless Zone Zero, right? As you can see, the interest there was around 32 million, whatever you want to call it, right? And this number going from 32 to 23 is a 32% difference. That means gacha games as a whole, or these games anyways, there's 32% less interest in these games over the past 6 months, which I think also correlates to revenue as well. I think that's why we see, if we go look at like the overall gacha revenue, it's moved down by 6%, right? Now, obviously, we're not taking into account every single game on this list here because we're not taking into account Love and Deep Space, stuff like that, but as you can see, like the most popular, I guess you could say, Western games, right, that we play here in the US, even though this is a worldwide search, there is less relevancy for these gacha games, and I think that is a problem of oversaturation. I think oversaturation is a big problem right now, because if you think 6 months, a year ago, what big gacha games did we have? We had Honkai Star Rail, Genshin Impact. Really, what else did we have? We had Tower of Fantasy. It failed, it flopped. What other big gacha game have we had that has really stirred up the market, right? It was literally Genshin Impact, Honkai Star Rail, and that was it. But now we have games like Zenless Zone Zero. Now we have games like Wuthering Waves. Now we have games like Azure Permilia coming out. We have games like Never This to Evidence now that's coming out. I just think that the market's getting really oversaturated, and no one has like a main game anymore, right? Or people that are playing these games are trying to play too many games and they're just getting burnt out because it's kind of just the same thing reused over and over and over again. And I think that's why you see Honkai Star Rail, Genshin Impact sitting at the top of the list up here, because these games are kind of like, think of Genshin Impact, right? It was like the originator for like the Breath of the Wild open world thing for mobile games, right? So obviously a lot of people are in that game right now. There's a lot of sunk cost fallacy because you put so much time, so much money into the game, so people are playing it. But I think that Honkai Star Rail is like a game that, you know, a lot of people think is like the de facto best turn-based game, right? It's more of original design. It doesn't take like an exact copy from Genshin Impact because it's a turn-based game, right? I think that's where ZZZ and Wuthering Waves falters, right? Whereas, yes, Wuthering Waves' combat system is a lot more complex than Genshin Impact's combat system. How much different really is it than the game? It's the same archetype of game. I don't think they do that much different to warrant like it to be at the top of the charts every month, right? Because people are just rather going to stick with Genshin Impact at the end of the day because they've already spent so much more time in that game. Not to say that obviously people play Wuthering Waves, but they aren't going to play that game when they have these two games right here, right? And I don't think we're ever going to go back to the time where, you know, these gacha games are making, you know, $90, $100 million per patch, right? I don't think we're going to go back to those times, just because there are a lot more options to choose between, and this is a good, healthy sign, right? Like, sure, seeing gacha games overall trend down is not a very good sign. Seeing the revenue trend down is not a good sign, but I think seeing more diversification of where this money is going for gacha games is a really good thing. This invites competition. This invites games to become better and make a better product overall for every single player, because now these companies will have to be more open to criticism. Because say I have a problem with Genshin Impact. Okay, let's say we now move over to Never the Evidence, right? Because, oh yeah, that game's like a mix between Wuthering Waves and also Genshin Impact. So now we have that kind of medium between these two games for the people that don't want to play those games. So yeah, okay, don't do what I want. Okay, I'm gonna quit now. I'm gonna go play this game now. I think this is very, very healthy for competition, right? I think the really only downside here is a lot of these new gacha games coming out don't really have their own self-identity. I don't think Zenless Zone Zero really has a self-identity. I know a lot of people say, the TVs, the TVs, the TVs! The TVs is not the main gameplay. People are not coming to play Zenless Zone Zero for the TVs. I'm sorry, TV fans out there. That's not why they're coming to the game. They're either A, coming to the game for the character models, they're B, coming to the game for the actual gameplay itself. And when the gameplay feels a lot like something like Honkai Impact 3rd, it feels similar to Genshin Impact. Like, the gameplay itself is not that much different, so you're not going to drive that much more of an audience to that game to really make it like a matchup with the top 2 games or top 3 games we have right now, right? So I think that gacha games are probably going to continue to trend down. I think that the revenue is going to continue to trend down until someone makes something new, makes something fresh and refreshing. I don't think we've had that yet. Even Wuthering Waves, right? I think Wuthering Waves does a lot of things right, but it's way too similar to games like Genshin Impact. I think it'll be way too similar to games like Never This to Evidence. And I think that Never This to Evidence or Azure Permilia are going to have these same exact issues, right? So I guess to sum up what I'm trying to say here, one thing does not sell a game anymore. So the majority of most players coming to the games now, they're not looking for just Big Booba, right? Sure, they might start a game for Big Booba, but then they quit because the gameplay's not there. They're not going to the game just for Booba, right? They want a full experience. They want good character design, good story, good music, audio design, whatever you want to call it, good gameplay. That's what they want, right? They want a more full experience rather than just going for one particular experience now, and I think that's where a lot of these gacha games are faltering at. Let me know, though. What are your thoughts in the comment section down below? Because do I think that Wuthering Waves is dying? No, I think this is where it's going to mellow out. I think it'll probably make around 10, 13 million every month. Is this where the company probably wanted the game to be? Probably not. Is ZZZ failing? Is ZZZ a failure? Yes, I think it absolutely is a failure, and I think it's failing the Hoyoverse as a whole. Obviously, we looked at this chart here. they're making less money now with Zenless Zone Zero than they were making without it. So from a company perspective, from a business perspective, releasing Zenless Zone Zero was worse because you gotta think, they're not only making less profit now, they're also having to put more money into development now too. So it's a lose-lose on both ends. More money for development, less money you're making from the game. So overall, I do think Zenless Zone Zero is an L. Anyways, that's gonna do it. Kind of went on a rant there. Hopefully you enjoyed. Maybe a long video. I don't know how I'm gonna edit this, but anyways, subscribe if you haven't already. Or don't, I don't know. Anyways, I love you guys. See you later. Bye-bye.